Pitter patter, let's get at her. How you all doing tonight? As always, we got Nicole, we got Jimbo, and we got Jen. How's everybody doing tonight?
Fantabulous.
Mm.
Excellent.
We got a good show for you tonight, guys. So tonight, I want to welcome you to the Wild West, where the untamed frontier comes alive. We're going to talk about the Colt, the Peacemaker, maybe a Winchester rifle, the legends that forged these weapons, and the legends around the Stetson. We'll talk about the rugged denim and the classic leather and the boots and the wardrobe. And we're going to kick it off with fucking Cole going at it. I'm going to take the cowboy hat off because I got to flip these earbuds around or I can't
Okay.
hear shit. So, Nicole, you're up.
Okay, so the Wild West was also known as the American Frontier and the Old West. So these were other names that they were known for. Pretty much during this time period, it was the expansion of North America. So they were pretty much like, instead of like being on the eastern states, they were trying to like move further west. And these states include Arizona, California, Colorado, Montana, New Mexico, North and South Dakota, parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, Western Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. Cowboy, the name like cowboy and like being a cowboy and dressing like a cowboy became the symbol for the West of the late 19th century, which is the Wild Wild West era. And one of the famous women of that era was Anne Oakley. She was known for her sharpshooting abilities in theater and renowned marksmanship. And she was known as a Little Sure Shot. And my famous man is Jim Miller. He was a badass outlaw because he was an elusive killer. And then I also have Jesse James, who was another American outlaw. You probably have heard of him. And then another fun fact is the average life expectation was 47 years old. A lot of people didn't live longer than that because they didn't know like the weather back then. It was like kind of unpredictable. They were in the West. They didn't really know the territorial that they were in. So a lot of people got sick on like traveling during the West era.
They died of dysentery like we did in Oregon Trail.
Yes, exactly. Yes. If you're a millennial, you'll remember that game, Oregon Trail. Pretty much that explains the Wild Wild West.
Everybody died of dysentery or a snake in their fucking boot or a wagon wheel broke. Someone had a tooth infection. Oh, God almighty. Jill, don't you start with Blazing Saddles yet, okay? Don't you start this shit. What
I'm
else
too
you got?
sober for this chat.
Well, next is like the clothing of the Wild West. The Old West cowboy attire was usually wide brim hats, more like Jim's than mine. An ordinary shirt worn between their cowboy vest and waistcoat or cotton or wool trousers. They were covered halfway with leather chaps. So leather became really popular. And did you know the fun fact? They got the leather from the Native Americans. And then they had distinct tall boots with spurs to help them with the cattle and horse riding. And they had oversized silk handkerchiefs that Jim's wearing as well. That they would wear around their neck. That also helped in their weather conditions while traveling through the West. Because if there was dust storms or wind storms or whatever, I'm not a weather person, but stuff like that, they would need that for that. They also were known to do really bad things during this time period and era, so that also helped with the bank robbing as well.
I was just gonna say, Jim, do you use that in the bedroom too with your Amazonian women?
Even when I'm by myself.
Even when
Listen, it's a hit. All I'm gonna say is he wears it well. Okay, he fucking wears it very well.
Oh man. Okay, Nicole, what else we got?
All right, and then the Western women, if they ever did dress up fancy, like let's say like a little bit more like this style, they wore Victorian dresses that were super beautiful. But I didn't really go into depth with it because a lot of the time when they talk about the Wild West, they talk more of like the cowboy, the cowgirl era. Because a lot of time the women, like the wives and they spent a lot of time on the ranches or on the settlements of wherever they were with their men. The cowgirls, as the Wild West, they were known as for fine riding and trick roping. So like we had like girl power back in the Wild West. Like women like were known for like roping and fine riding. They were expert in marksmanship. Women spent a lot of time on the ranch with their men. In 1910, it was showgirls like Annie Oakley, that commonary Jane, I can't say her first name, Calamity Jane. And others came in the future for
Calamity
cowgirls
Jane.
fashion. Okay,
Calamity.
Yeah, Calamity. It helped them like pave the direction of cowgirls fashion. You know, they were total rebels. They were buying and designing, pretty much making their own dress wear. Like that's what they were doing. They weren't really buying it from stores. Cowgirls and cowboys were pretty much just putting this stuff together, and it was called cowboy attire, cowgirl attire. They did get the leather from the Native Americans. In the early 20th century, at the end of the 19th century of the Wild West era, denim was adopted as preferred denim wear fabric choice for Western cowboys, miners, and farmers of the U.S. So they didn't really denim wear didn't really come out until the very end of the Wild West era because they were wearing like the wool trousers and stuff like that and the leather chaps. Showering was not a thing back in the day. They did not shower. They had like little water that they would pour in the basins. It was called bathing. But when I think of bathing, I think of a bath.
So what you're talking about is a hobo bath that we call nowadays.
Yes.
So most people take in the CVS bathroom. But could you imagine these brothels that took place back then? You go in, you get some fucking straight rye whiskey, you sit down, you have a drink. Oh, she looks good. And you go up there and she hasn't washed that bush for fucking 3 weeks. Jimbo. I'm just saying, man. And they didn't believe in shaving back then.
They were full on bushes.
It was all natural. What else do you got for us?
Yeah, so the next important influence on the Western style was cowboy. So like that was pretty much like the Western influence of it. The most symbolic of the cowboy gear was the chaps. That had the leather belt and had the spurs on it. So like they say that like the most symbolic attire from that era was the chaps. There was woolly chaps that originated among California Valerias, which is a Native American tribe, but they were adopted by the cowboys. Native Americans during this time period also, I did include them as well. They wore leather leggings, cloth clothes, Anooks, and moccasins.
Go ahead, Jim.
So that's pretty close. The whole attire that we can contribute to the American cowboy came from Spain. Came over. The Spanish had cowboys as far back as medieval time, and
Yes,
their style of ranching came from that. And when the conquistadors and the Spanish settlers came over, they brought horses with them because we didn't have the horse that we see now in the North American continent. And they brought that with them. And then the Mexican vaquero was a huge influence on what you see cowboys wear today, from saddles to the high-heeled boots, to the chaps, the bits and the reins on horses. Everything contributes from Spain and the Mexican vaquero. The influence that they had, and everybody thinks of chaps being that long ankle length chap. A lot in this Mexico and Southwest, they were what they call chinks, which only go to the knee. And then the full chap that you would wear, most you would see cowboys wear. And then the woolies was a big thing in California and in the North because they had that warmth to them in the cold weather that you're going to see sometimes in the high desert and in the northern states like Wyoming, Montana.
Are those the ones that really like belled the fuck out?
They look like sheep's wool woolies. They look
Yeah.
There's actually some rodeo cowboys that will wear them and they'll load them up with baby powder. So when they come out of the chute, it's like dust and it's just like, looks pretty cool.
I wonder if I could wear those while fucking and add some dust, make it look like I'm going real quick. I don't know.
Just don't get it wet.
I was gonna say that's the water mixture.
So the slip and slides are out. Don't do this with
it's gonna be
them.
Just
make a
paste. And a pretty interesting fact with the Mexican vaquero, a lot of them were also Native American. And then a lot of the working cowboys in the continent were also, they're saying up to 25% or around, were also freed slaves. So the black community had no make and paste, exactly. So you had a lot of influence from a lot of different cultures that really developed the American cowboy, and you can attribute that, and they do, especially out west. You don't see, you know, the differences. Like everybody's accepted, and if you work hard, that's it.
Okay, so I have a question since you're pretty experienced in this shit. Do you find that more of the Mexican customs and cowboys per se stay closer towards like the New Mexico and Texas area as far as like their homesteads and things like that?
You'll see the ranch styles are a lot close to that. You'll see what they wear a lot close to that. The shorter chaps, the lighter clothes, the silk, wild rags, because it's about keeping cool. It's about the dust that builds up.
Right.
The more layers, the heavier gear kind of got developed once the ranchers started moving north.
If so coming towards our way and stuff, where it got colder and stuff
where it gets colder, and then that's kind of like where the American cowboy, you got like the long heavy, the wool coats, the wide brim. What's that, bud?
The Yellowstone, like the Yellowstone and the ranch.
Mm-hmm. And with the hats, they were always a beaver felt because it's waterproof, so it protects you from the rain. It'll hold water. You can drink from it. You can feed water to your horse with it. And that came about from a lot of the fur trade that happened 50 to 100 years before the cowboys.
And it's still popular today in a lot of states.
Beaver felt hats and you'll see it an X grade on it. 4X, 10X, 100X means the finer the felt, the more smooth the hat's going to be, the longer it's going to last. And the quality is just better. And it's still that way today. You can buy a regular 4X hat for about maybe $80 to $100. A 10X, a few $100, a 100X, thousands of dollars for a hat.
I got mine given to me from Brad Ainsley.
And a funny thing with Nicole, with you mentioned like Annie Oakley, Calamity Jane, and all them. The biggest thing that put them in the eye of the non-Western or the non-cowboy was dime store novels. That they were kind of around from 1860 to the early 1900s that put these actual people in history to the forefront. And then once you had the expansion and the cities were building up, you had like Buffalo Bill, who created the Wild West show. And he would take actual real characters like Wild Bill, Annie Oakley. He had Sitting Bull, and they would go and perform in cities and say, this is so-and-so, and this is what he did. His show, Dime Store Novels, exaggerated a lot to bring, to make it like how Hollywood exaggerates things. They did the same thing to glorify a lifestyle that was hard and rugged. And like you said, people didn't live that long. And they just really glorified it. And, the gunfighters, there weren't many of them, but they were popular. Actual working cowboys, most of them didn't carry guns because they couldn't afford them. Usually your ramrod, which is your
What is your take on Pretty Boy Floyd? Was he a cowboy or was he just an outlaw running moonshine?
He was an outlaw running moonshine, in my opinion.
Yeah, because he was later. I'm going to say he was like in the 1920s, 1930s, right?
Well, we have the Pretty Boy Floyd Museum. Like, we have actually where they picked him up here in Ohio. Yeah. And it's literally right down the road from my house. So I always think it's like kind of monumental, but I don't see him as a cowboy. I see him as an outlaw moonshine runner who just happened
I see him as a gangster.
Yes, he's a gangster, not per se
like
a cowboy.
Mafioso. No, like when I think of cowboy, I think of like the Marlboro Man, right? Like on the cigarette pack, leaning up against in a cold fucking morning, drinking his coffee out of the fucking tin cup,
Bonanza.
banging it off. Yeah, then dumps it out, spits into the same fucking cup, dumps it out, throws some whiskey in it, swishes around, drinks it, running around. None of that, like, Billy Crystal fucking movie,
Right.
City Slickers, although they had assless chaps in that. And I was almost kind of waiting for Jim to come busting out in the assless chaps and, like, I don't know, be barrel racing on the counter, but hey,
That's my other page.
That's Lincoln bio.
Lincoln bio.
In the bio of this, make sure you subscribe. By the way, guys.
4XS, so 9/16 inches. Okay.
One of my subjects that I hold close to me is also rodeoing, which that's America's first sport. And that got created by these ranches, these cattle companies, that the ranch hands would compete against each other. And they took the actual working process of a ranch and competed against each other. And one of the main events is steer wrestling, which William Pickett invented that. And I'm going to say that was like in the 1890s, close to 1900, and he was a black man. And he's in the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame, and he invented steer wrestling, which is still
huge
an event today.
Isn't it a pretty big event in the rodeo?
It's a huge event.
Yeah.
Like, we even have, by me, it's called Hopple's Rodeo, but there are some big people that show up, even though it's a small town kind of event. Like, because I have a cousin that was a rodeo rider, those people come in groups. Like, there's a family of them, and you can either be in the family or you can be on the outside. And chances are you want to be in that family because they're going to be watching your back no matter what. That's also something that I've noticed about, like, true cowboys, true rodeo people, is they're some of the most loyal people.
It's I talked to a friend of mine quite a bit about it because we're about 40 minutes east of Cowtown Rodeo in Woodstown, New Jersey, which is the oldest PRCA rodeo that's constantly been going east of the Mississippi. And when he goes, well, how do you do it? I go, we travel together. It's almost like carnies, to where you go from rodeo to rodeo. There's anywhere 3 to 4 guys in a car or a truck, and maybe one guy wins. You split the money because that's everybody's entry fee for the next rodeo.
Yep.
And you help each other out. It's because that's kind of.
It's a family. It's a camaraderie.
They call us rodeo bums, because you don't make a lot of money. 90%, everybody you see on TV is that 5%. Just like any pro sport, you know what I mean? The actual sport, 90% of it is guys just getting by, young guys that want to, do something, and it's a camaraderie, and it is a brotherhood, a familyhood, men and women both.
And I applaud that, because there's not a lot of groups or societies, so to speak, that are like that anymore.
And it's still that way today.
Yeah, and I don't see it ever changing, no matter how bad things get.
Yeah.
It won't change. There's no way that will change. It's kind of like the blue line in the police force. It's kind of like, you know what I mean? And if you look at a lot of the things that we have today, all of that's built off of that camaraderie.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, not everything, but you know what I mean? Like, the things that fucking matter. And I just want to point out, Sarah, the good rodeo that you speak of, we talk about that on Fridays, not tonight.
Those include ponchos too. You have to bring your own poncho.
Those whips and chains and spurs and clamps, that's Friday. I'm just kidding, Sarah. I couldn't help it.
Friday.
Sarah.
She's fine. She's my girl. She'll be back.
Sarah's my friend. What are you talking about? Don't you steal Bogart and Sarah?
Okay, first of all,
ma'am.
Sarah.
Listen,
Sarah.
Don't make me start pointing with the pipe, okay?
Right,
no.
Grandpa
No.
Joe.
I had a Grandpa Joe, actually. Anyway, okay, Nicole, did you have anything to finish up on your piece of Western wear?
Not so much Western wear, no.
What else did you have for us?
Okay, so pretty much this is the key aspects of the Wild West customs. Cowboy life was herding large cattle across vast areas, riding horses with skilled horsemanship, using lasso to catch the cattle. Another thing, in the Wild West, there was an ideal place for lawlessness. Gambling, drunkenness, brawling, and prostitution were common during this period, and many of the men spent a lot of time in the saloons, hanging out, you know.
Were the wives okay
with
with
an
them being in
unsettled
the saloons?
wilderness? What?
Were the wives okay with them being in the saloon all the time?
Not all the
I
time.
mean,
Some of them
if
worked
you're
in
really
them.
going to talk about the wives,
Some of them ran the brothel while the other
Right.
one
yeah,
bartended.
probably, yeah, I probably that. During the American frontier of the Old West, it was an unsettled wilderness, wild animals, and scattered tribes of the indigenous Native Americans. So, yeah, so it was like a wild time, and I think that's really how it got its name, Wild West. Life was hard in the Old West. Pioneers worked hard to farm on land that was usually too dry for most of the crops. So a lot of the time when they were trying to farm and start, farming in their areas, it was usually too dry. That's just
that's
one
when the
thing
gold rush took place. You know what I mean? If you think about it, that's why the gold rush was such a big pinnacle part of the Wild West, right? Because you couldn't farm. You guys are starving. You're sitting out there. There was mining out there. There was steel because now the railroad's coming through. You have the great train robberies that took place on horse with Jim with his mask on coming down. I mean, what do you had? Billy the Kid, right? I mean, you had some fucking awesome shit go down in this. And if you think about it, yeah, they didn't live past 30, but they lived more than 99% of the people we have out here today. I mean, take one of these Xenial kids who's allergic to fucking gluten, okay, and put him against some dude who got bit by a rattlesnake, sucked the fucking poison out, and then decided to shoot the rattlesnake and eat the fucker for dinner. I mean,
they were hungry.
Underbred. And I mean, or let's just go off into the middle of the fucking desert for days on end on a trail and try to hunt on the prairie, or not the prairie, but you know what I mean. Like, you're hunting over and fucking you got a pack of wolves following you or coyotes. You're fucking wooden wheels. Like, I mean, this shit wasn't a joke. But the excitement's fucking there, right? I mean, if you think about it, I mean, you're thinking of the fucking speed revolvers. You're thinking fucking whiskey. You're the bar fights with the guy coming flying over the rail because he took his turn with the hooker before the other one. You know what I mean? Like, it was insane though. I mean, cumbrellas, okay? These false eyelashes all these ladies like to wear, they were called cumbrellas. They were to keep the cum out of the eyes of the fucking prostitutes. That's where they came from. Do you
Honestly?
know? 100%. And do you also know this lovely little thing that Jim and I like to do? This was actually not created for men. This was created for women because it was unladylike for women to smoke in their white silk gloves.
Okay, but it was also unladylike to spit in the Wild West.
That's why we always say it's ladylike to swallow. Just saying.
Something with the age factor. Something that everybody knows about is the gunfight to OK Corral in Tombstone. Mm-hmm. A couple of the McClurg, the McCluskeys, they were 18, 21. Morgan was, I think, 22, 23. Doc Holliday was one of the oldest. He was 31 when that happened. They were young. They were, and that gunfight only lasted, I want to say it was 14 or 15 seconds.
I was going to say it wasn't long at all.
There's actually a book, and Tombstone when they wrote took that book of the account because so many people seen it happen. Mm-hmm. From the verbiage back and forth is so accurate in that movie because they took it from that account of what actually happened.
It's crazy.
And when I went there, That corral's the size of like my kitchen and my living room.
Yeah.
It's small. That corral's really small.
It's
in town. It's a little corral in town.
Now think about it, right? Now, not to jump into, too far down into the rabbit hole just yet. But if you honestly think about today with our technology with guns, right? We're pretty fucking accurate with this shit, right? We got Tritigon night sights, we got scopes, we got this. They had fucking iron sights. Half the time they didn't even have fucking sights. They're staring down and pulling. So I mean, if you're thinking about it, the shooting from the hip was what was made famous. Then was the quick draw and snap. You know what I mean?
And that wasn't so much the case because the high majority of them couldn't shoot. They couldn't. They were within 5 feet, 10 feet of each other.
Well, we're talking about taking 10 paces back to back away from each other.
Yeah, that also is not 100% accurate. That was kind of glorified with the dime store novels. You know what I mean? It might have happened a couple of times and somebody heard about it. Now, they think it happens in every town,
right?
Every Sunday at noon.
Yeah, I was gonna say because they make it more like it happened outside of every saloon every evening. Like,
and it was pretty common early on that you could not carry in town. That was very common.
So it's like DC.
They and if you did have a gun, you kept them at the camp outside of town.
Right. And it's funny if you think about like what actual, like there's some of the nationalities that make up this like group of Wild West, right? So like you had the Irish that migrated out west, you have the Scottish that migrated out west, you have all these cultures that have heavy drinking, like to fucking brawl for fun.
The Chinese with the opium. That was
huge because they were coming in from California. They were coming from the other way. So I mean, you have both of these things meet. Right. So it's just like a perfect fucking storm of fucking testosterone, rage, alcoholism. I mean, you only lived to 30. Who gave a shit?
Yeah.
Right.
I was born in the wrong fucking era. I mean, my liver identifies as one of these people, for fuck's sake. I don't know.
But if you look today and even look 30 years back from now, the work ethic was so much different.
100%.
Like, yes, the women worked at the house. A lot of them, most of the Wild West women did work out in the ranches. Like Nicole said, they were tending to the horses, doing what they needed to do. But there was still, like, them children grew up knowing how to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they started
knowing what work value was.
Because you had to bust your ass or you weren't going to make it.
But they weren't children. At 5 years old, they were already a quarter of the way through their fucking life. So
they're already milking the cows at 5.
Right.
It was usually just the young men the boys that would go to school, and that was only up for a couple grades.
And that was from the locals, all in the same fucking building, all in the middle of town with one fucking teacher. I mean,
yeah, I guess thinking that way, they were already a quarter of their age. So
by the time they got out of school, that was college for them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because think about what did you really have to fucking do back then? You had to make money, feed your family, and defend your land. It was hard, but it was basic, right? Like you had to make enough money to keep the bank off of your back so that you kept your property, right? You had to take care. Taxes weren't really a thing then. I mean, there was the town and shit, but it wasn't like.
But it wasn't like
yeah. It's not like bend you over a barrel and make you hum the fucking 50 states. You know what I mean? What was it? It was like a shilling, a penny, a fucking whatever, a bit for a fucking shot of whiskey or a whole bottle. I think it was like 2 things for fucking to take a girl for a whole night. Like you bought a horse for what? Maybe 40 or 50, whatever. Like it just doesn't, I don't know. I mean,
well, the men would get roped into that lifestyle because they didn't make much. And as soon as they would get paid, they spent it all in one shot in town.
Right.
Just like the traders, the skinners and the traders. When they would do the rendezvous and trade everything, they spent the money they made on whiskey and women and gambling, and they're back to busting they're back again.
It literally was just a sustainability until they got to the next season, correct?
Yep. That's it. They would trade for what they needed, and then whatever else they had, they pissed away.
Yeah. I mean, I could you imagine though, like actually being in that? Like, I would love
No.
to. Oh, I would have loved to in that bar. Oh God, I would have been in that saloon. I'd have had my pistol on my hip. Look, half the days I wake up wanting to fight somebody. You know what I mean? Like that to me would like. But here's my issue: no shower, no toilet paper, shitty teeth. I am sure the pussy smelled like fucking tuna fish and God knows what else. Could you imagine getting herpes or gonorrhea or any of
Well,
that shit back then?
syphilis
It was a
ran
big
rapid.
thing. Yeah.
Syphilis ran rapid. Wild Bill Hickok was known for having syphilis so bad he was blind, just about blind, when he was shot and killed.
I mean, like, could you imagine? Like, you go into
And
town.
the cure for it back then was a doctor taking a hot iron and putting it up through to cauterize the internal pus and everything that syphilis caused, but they could never get rid of it. And he was just about blind when he was shot and killed. He was just
Stop.
What kind of syphilis?
Stop. First of all, Andrew, we'll get to your comment in a minute. Just hold the fuck on. And I did not know that. Did you just tell me that they heat a fucking rod and ram it up your piss hole and expect you're going to be able to pee again?
That's the only way you could pee again, because it cauterized the inside of all the infection, so you could pee again.
I don't know if it's just me or any other guy in the chat had just a fucking sharp pain go from the tip of your fucking willy all the way through to the back of your asshole. I don't know. If it didn't, God bless you.
Well, I'm a girl and I had that same pain you just had.
Nicole, could you imagine that? Could you imagine a hot fucking poker going up your fucking hoo-ha?
No, I can't imagine it. It sounds so dangerous and
How
hurt.
it would do for the
And
women?
and how many people did they use the one rod on? Like,
Probably everybody, and the cow and the sheep.
No. I'm out. I'll pass naturally from herpesipolitis.
No, you're gonna die of dysentery behind because you got a snake.
I'm just gonna let it take me out naturally.
Oh God, like.
Yeah, that's why I wouldn't want to. I would no shot.
You know,
I love the history. I love the history of it. I love.
Just
everything
replay
about
it now at your house, like at
You know
home.
what? You start getting the burn. That's when you find a train.
We'll talk about that on Friday.
Yeah. Facts. Remember, keep your daily dose of penicillin, ladies and gentlemen.
Penicillin is your friend.
It is. If you have
I heard
scurvy,
vitamin D was your friend too, but
that's how you get babies. Anyway,
not if you swallow them.
Listen, if your mouth identifies as a daycare, that's your business. I'm sorry. Wait, can you?
Well, it is my business. So
open your mouth for a second. I heard him.
Help me.
Let me out. I want fruit snacks. Okay. Nicole, do you have anything else on that research that you did on this time period? No? Jimbo, why don't we move into you, sir?
The last couple of things that I have is talking about some of the things they did carry. Like I said, most of them did not carry. They couldn't afford it. It was usually the cook that had usually the cook would have a weapon on him because he was in camp. And a lot of times it was to keep animals away. A lot of times it was to keep animals away to defend them if
from stealing food.
Trying to steal food because that was a target.
Was it rifle or was it rifle or pistol that the cooks?
Whatever they shotgun, anything.
Whatever they could afford.
Yep.
Okay.
One of the pretty cool facts are that if they could afford it, Colt Single Action Army, that was so popular when that came out, 1873. Also, the Winchester came out in 1873. Before that, a lot of guys carried the Navy, the 36 Navy, because that was something some of them might have had after the Civil War. And so a lot of these guys were ex-Civil War soldiers, and they had it. If they had it, that's what they had. And then once the Single Action Army came out, they said the saying is men were not created equal. Sam Colt made them equal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times these guys, they could get a 4440, which they made in the single action army and in the Winchester, and they would go for that because then the same ammunition they could use for both, and they're not buying two different ammunitions. That was very popular with the guys that could afford that.
Yeah, but we're talking about the people that own the mines, not the people fucking working in the mine.
That was usually your ramrod, which is your trail boss, the cook, the guys that made the money. Your average cowboy, unless he had something that he might have had from the war, or instead of spending it on the gambling and the girls, he would, maybe get something he could throw in a saddle, because a lot of them wouldn't carry. It would be in their saddlebag in case for animals. They weren't usually worried about. It was later in life that they had to start the biggest battles were with like the Lincoln County War with the farmers started using barbed wire and cutting off ranges, cutting off grazing ground. That became a huge issue. And that was where a lot of the fighting later towards the end of the cowboy, that golden age of the cowboy came into play. They would fight over property, and that was, they would cut fences. They would cut fences, and the people that bought, that was their property. And they're like, we got a lot of cattle. We're cutting fences
then too, though, right?
There was a lot of everything back then. It was the Wild West. I mean, if somebody walked into your fucking little ranch that you had in the middle of the night and the guy wasn't there, you think anything's going to stop him other than the rifle that you had?
That's what I mean.
It's derogatory to be a farmer. They call them sodbusters.
Outside.
They called farmers sodbusters. It was derogatory because they felt they were taking up valuable grazing land.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the Europeans that started going out, like the Germans and the Polish, with the sheep and things like that, they would annihilate cattle grazing ground. It was such a thing that just came to a head once the railroads really took off. That kind of just put the last nail in the coffin for the big ranches, and that's in the early 1900s. It's not that long ago. It was like around, 1910, 1912 when it kind of finally subsided.
Could you imagine? You have no idea. You're out in the West, right? Like, you have no idea about the steam locomotive, nothing. You're just on your fucking horse. You've got your fucking single action, lever action fucking rifle that you got in a crossbody so that you could pull it out and use it, right? You're just riding around and all of a sudden you start seeing this fucking metal getting hauled in, going, well, what's that? Oh, we're building the Trans-Pacific Railroad so we could connect one side to the other. Well, what is that? Could you imagine seeing this shit? Meanwhile, you're sitting there in the river with a fucking sieve just trying to get like 2 pieces of gold to get paid so that you can
the gold rush. That's why the San Francisco 49ers are called the 49ers.
Exactly.
It was a gold rush, and that was how many people spent their life savings to try to get up there and just die frostbitten, frozen to a log somewhere, It's like,
okay, do you not think that it's kind of crazy that still to this day, like, Alaska does so much of the gold mining?
Because it's huge. It's still an untapped resource in so many places because it's so difficult.
But a lot of people don't know how to put in the work to make it sustainable.
Yeah.
Like, I'm guilty of watching the Gold Rush shows. Like, that's the only reason I know what I know about the Gold Rush. Because I was never, like, they teach us minimal in school.
Yeah.
And about Wild West history, it was very minute. Like, I feel like if we were going to learn things in history, we should have learned things that apply to us and how we can move forward. Because I feel like the history that they're teaching the kids these days literally has nothing to do with us.
And
nothing.
It's sugar-coated.
Yeah.
It's sugar-coated. Yeah. I mean, a whole nother subject we can do another night is talking about, Native Americans and, how they just got screwed over.
Royally.
And continue to get screwed over.
Listen, you can start with the Trail of Tears. You could go to the fucking Buffalo Reserves. You could go to the lands. You can go to the deals, the purchases, the Louisiana. I mean, you could go through the whole fucking game. And it ain't even just Pocahontas. I mean, like, we're talking all the way back. It's terrible. We're talking about rifles and blankets with chicken pox in them.
They're finding out that wasn't true either.
Did you tell me there was no biological warfare back then?
No, the way they talk about it, like doctors talk about it, they said it wouldn't have happened that way. Maybe one or two, but not the mass. Like they blame that on like mass annihilation of indigenous people. I won't say Native Americans because now they don't like to be called Native Americans. So
I don't know.
Indigenous.
Yeah,
they're saying that it would be really after like 2 or 3 that your body would then. They say it was worse than that. It wasn't as easy as chicken pox.
I got you. So you're saying this was human intervention, or they think it was human intervention?
100%. And that's just like one of those things.
And here's the thing, though: if that's the case, then that would probably beat World War II.
It would be worse.
And
I think it'd be worse.
That's what I'm saying. It would be worse in number wise.
Yeah.
And you look at who built the railroads. It was the poor Chinese, the poor Irish, freed slaves.
Oh,
who did
the canary
work on the railroads.
Think about the canary in the thing, just to make sure that in the cage, just to make sure that in the mines, to make sure if the canary stopped singing, you knew you were going to die. Get out.
Man, we're not far from that. Jim Thorpe, PA.
Yeah.
All Irish, Scots Irish, Welsh, children.
Mm-hmm.
They said the skies were. There's a great movie. I'll think of the name of it in a second. That talks about the Hibernians which is an Irish Catholic organization in Jim Thorpe, and the wars that happened because of the coal mines in Jim Thorpe, PA. Amazing movie. And now you're talking into the early 1900s and.
Yeah, we're talking after the Wild West. I mean, that's another time for another day. But I mean, I still would love to have been on horseback, rolling through to kill a buffalo, take it back to my house, fucking butcher it up. But you didn't have a freezer. You had to make it all, or make jerky, or fucking salt the shit out of it. I mean, like that's why jerky is the way jerky is. I mean, they dehydrated with salt and vinegar.
And that came from American Indians. They called it pemmican.
Like, it's crazy if you look at the number of customs that we stole. And when I say stole, it's because we stole them from the Indians. Give me that. Give it to me. But it's stuff that a lot of us older generations still instill into our generations, and the work ethic, the preservation of food, the hunting, even though we've moved on with our freezers and our fancy $700 dehydrators these days, and so on and so forth, but we still carry on some of those customs and some of those traits in different ways almost daily.
Oh, for sure.
I want to challenge all of you. Have any of you seen 1,000 Ways to Die in the Wild West?
Yes.
Okay. No, Nicole, that you got to watch that for Friday. If you can see it. I think it's on Hulu.
It's pretty
it is hilarious.
Funny.
The best part, my favorite scene in that whole movie was when they're like, "Oh, look, the ice is here." And it was. I mean, they would literally bring in big fucking blocks of ice. They would put it on these fucking carts. They would truck them down and chip it off and drop off. And I mean, it would be stored. And then when it was gone, it was gone. But like they're lifting it up, trying to get it, and bam! Boom. Oh, a little bit like we got at the bar today.
Well, see that it's funny. We were just talking about this. It might have been my mother because she watches a lot of the old West. She goes, "They're always drinking whiskey. They're always drinking whiskey. How come not beer?" I'm like, well, because you couldn't keep it temperatured and it would go bad, where whiskey wouldn't.
Doesn't go bad.
And the Scotch and the Irish that brought whiskey over to the Americas, because it was outlawed in Scotland and in Ireland. Yeah. So they brought this, that process here. I go, you couldn't drink the water because that would make you sick. So you drank whiskey, and it wasn't
whiskey
until
was also the remedy for everything too.
That was your
You
medicine.
had a toothache, you had a stomach ache, you had this, you had that. Mom's giving you whiskey as a child for a toothache.
But think about
Okay, maybe it was just my dad.
no, I had it too. But you had
Rub it on the gums.
Just rub it on there.
You have whiskey without the E, which is made overseas in Scotland and Ireland. And you have the whiskey with the E here, which is the American whiskey.
No.
What do you mean, no? Yeah, it is.
Nope. The only one with the E is Scotch whiskey.
Without the E.
Correct.
Yeah, you just said
You know what I say with? Yeah, the only whiskey without the E is Scotch.
It's Scotch because that's the original. So when it's here,
whiskey comes from the Gaelic Vishka Baha, which means water of life. So that's Vishka Baha we get whiskey from.
Right. I don't know the Gaelic, but I knew about the in the Scotch. But if you look at the Scotch we have today versus what they had back in the day was completely different. The whiskey back then was more bourbon than when it was whiskey, and it actually really was more moonshine than whiskey.
Because when it came to America, they used corn, which
right. Exactly.
They used rye and wheat, which, as a matter of fact, in Scotland, most of it was gin. Gin actually comes from Scotland because when the British outlawed them from distilling whiskey, they said, well, you can't, gin's not whiskey. So a lot of gin, the gin originated in Scotland because they weren't allowed, it was illegal for them to distill whiskey.
Jesus Christ.
Because they were using herbs.
The funny thing, though, is
very
that makes sense, yeah.
I mean, fair. I wonder, Jesus Christ. Well, have you tried what is it? Is it Yellowstone Prairie Dog whiskey?
No.
Have you tried that? I'll have to. I think it's Yellowstone or it's Wild West. I'll go get a bottle of it for the next time.
There's High West that's out of.
Did you say Prairie Dog?
No, Prairie Dog.
You ever go fishing for a prairie dog?
No, but
so what you do? So what you do is you get a fishing pole and you pull out your fishing line and make like a speed noose on it and put it around a hole, and then you start blowing in the other holes. You have people like blowing on holes, and you just sit there all day. And then once he pops his head out, you like yank him, and you're like wing, and and he's like diving and jumping
and that's why you give me the meerkat when we're on live. Now I understand. now I get it. Now I fucking get it.
Yeah.
Makes sense now, huh?
Jesus Christ. Well, I don't. Nicole, you're on mute if you were trying to say something. Okay. But yeah, I don't know. Like when you try like actual old like whiskey like style that they make now, a lot of people don't like them. It's too bitter. Like Yukon Jack. Yukon Jack is it's fucking disgusting. I drink it. I enjoy it. People don't like it. But I would say that comparable to original whiskey, that mixed with moonshine would pretty much be what whiskey was back then.
And then our whole style of what we drink changed dramatically after Prohibition.
Is this what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the High West.
Okay.
But there is Prairie Dog whiskey, but it's called, they made it like 4 years ago. The High Noon. It was like Prairie something. Prairie, it's over here in the stores. I'll have to get a bottle. I'll send it to you. Okay, so we're going to move from the rifles. Do you have anything else, Jim?
No, thank you. No, that's
okay.
Thanks.
Well, I know I was asking because, we're leading in from the Winchester and the Peacemaker and the Colt into
I have all the new age stuff though. Like I went and looked, and like I do have like some Mosins. I do have a 444. I do have a 44 long. But most of I went looking through my stuff because I was like, oh, I'll find stuff. Like I figured out that I'm not much of a revolver girl. That I'm more of a rifle girl than anything else. I have about every rifle that is known to exist, but like I don't have a Henry. Like you would think that me being who
Oh,
I
man.
am would have a Henry. But no, Jen went out and got the BMG instead of the Henry.
Well, you know, to be fair, who the fuck doesn't want a BMG? And yeah, Henry's nice and all, but I'll take my 30-30 Marlin. You know what I mean? I'll take my
and
3.
that's how I feel about my 444. Like
Which
give
that
me my
Marlin
444.
came off of the style of the 92 Winchester.
Exactly.
Right.
1892 Winchester, which
I
is a phenomenal. That was the first I hunted with the 94 Winchester 30-30 was the first rifle I hunted
Yeah.
with.
Dude, I love the fact my dad still gets pissed off because it was his, right? And it was my grandfather's before his, and so on and so, you know what I mean? So he gets so mad when we get out into the woods, and I'll literally, and you'll just hear it go and rack. And he's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm reloading. I'm going to hit that motherfucker." Like, they're like, "What do you think this is? The Wild West?" Oh, fucking so. Let's go. You know,
Fucking
like,
right. It is.
Winchester, they had a model, which was their carbine. They called it a saddle carbine. That they had the oversized loop in it that you could put your hand in it with a pair of thick gloves, and it would fit inside the action.
That's cool.
And they still make it.
See, like I need more historical stuff. Like my AR, I built it. Like piece by piece, I built that. I did. It's mine. It has a pink handle and everything. Like that
Nice.
shit's mine. Like,
Doesn't shock me that it has a pink handle.
it also has a skull.
Does it have a poncho launcher in it too?
No, it doesn't. It just has a nice 5.56 that comes out of it.
Nice.
So if you fuck with me, that's what you're gonna eat is the tip of my 5.56.
A really fun thing, Jen, that you can check out is that it really became popular in the late 80s, early 90s. It's called SAS, SASS. It's the Single Action Shooting Society, to where guys, they call it live action cowboy shoots, to where they'll set up on a range and they have to use single action revolvers. They have to use period accurate guns.
Yeah.
And it's current and it's current manufacturers that make these. Ruger makes the Ruger Vaquero that is almost identical to the single action Army.
Yeah.
The Vaquero is nasty.
I had one in 357, 44, 45. You can get them stainless with the poly ivory grips. Like you can do it up. Bird head grip with the smaller barrel. Shotguns. You have to have a hammered shotgun to shoot in these events. Henry makes them because Henry still makes these replica of the period guns. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, Henry
Winchester
rifle now still looks the same as it did back then.
What's that?
Henry rifle now still looks the same as it did back then.
100%.
Yep.
Except now it's a little more gold. It's a little more zhuzh to it, but
Bougie.
it's the same.
It's bougie.
Well, it's more like
And the yellow boy is still the yellow boy that they made, 150 years ago. Is
that the golden boy? Same as the golden boy.
Yeah.
Here's
the thing with it.
Or rifles.
Well,
I got thrown into
Well, Wally
it.
has a whole bunch of them.
Well, I got thrown
what
into it when we when we started doing our business that we have.
Right.
I kind of got thrown into it, and I honestly at first was like, I am not going to enjoy this. This is going to be blah. I now own more than Zach does. I also go to the range more than he does. And I also consider myself a better shot than he is. So
there you go.
You know what? Fuck you, Carl, but you do bring up a good point. The Gatling gun was born in the Wild West.
That was from the Army. That was
from the Civil War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But didn't they make that even smaller though? Like, I mean, there was the one for the Army, but didn't they choke?
There's a tabletop version.
Yeah.
Which they hardly ever used because
tripod legs.
It was so expensive to shoot it.
Yeah.
Right.
You're going through 300 rounds in less than 5 seconds.
I mean,
And you're hoping and praying you hit something. There is no accuracy whatsoever with that.
And they would burn them up, and they would burn up the barrels in them.
The whole term,
burn up the
you
barrel.
couldn't hit the broadside of a barn was because these guns were so fucking inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
But at 5 feet, they were fucking accurate and deadly. I mean, think about it. You get a bullet wound in the fucking Wild West, you're dead. You're dead. If you don't die from infection or dysentery or the snake in your boot, you're dying from the bullet wound because it just will tear right through it. And it wasn't like today's bullets that break apart and create shrapnel. We're talking solid fucking ball.
The largest issue they would have, and they really seen it with the Civil War, was infection, because you're putting that dirty ass piece of wool clothing that you're wearing is now inside your
wound. Yep.
Right.
And that's where a lot of the infection and death came from. Was
not even from the wound, from what?
Oh yeah, no, it was the infection. Well, because think about it, it was ball ammo anyway. So I mean, if you were able to get an accurate shot, and even if you were able to fucking hit somewhere vital, chances are you weren't, and it would just rip right through. But now you're taking no bath, no shower, no fucking antibiotics, no nothing, and probably fucking
not very much water either.
Syphilis, and then go right through it. Now somebody's going to take a cloth from them and rip it off of their nasty fucking body and plug the hole up. I mean,
and not to get off on a different subject, but that was the turn. One of the biggest turns of the Civil War was going from ball and patch to a maxi ball, which was so much more accurate, faster and accurate. To where ball and patch, to where that's where we started shooting muzzleloaders, here.
Yeah.
It's just like you can get it to like maybe this, where a maxi ball, now your group's like this,
See,
and I will say, even today, like I find, and I don't know if it's just me, but like I got a 38 bodyguard. Was like, this is gonna be my favorite weapon I own. Went outside, was 10 foot away from the target and couldn't hit that bitch if I tried. So I put sights on it, and I'm like, this will make it better. Put sights on it, still couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. So I was like, okay, maybe this isn't the carry gun for me. You know what I'm saying? Because I want to be able to. Now, do I know I'm going to have a bigger target? Obviously. But I don't want to take the chance of me getting hurt because I'm not experienced enough with my weapon. So that's why I switched to my shield. And I can take the bottle cap off the top of a bottle with it. Now, if I could have got better with that 38, it was the perfect size for me. But I find it hard to get a lot of accuracy with a lot of revolvers.
And because of that, when people ask my professional opinion, that's where the difference comes between carry protection and home protection. My number one answer 100% of the time for home protection is a shotgun.
100%. I'm
because
a complete agree.
Now, Jack, your adrenaline, say you have a home invader, your adrenaline's pumping through your head. You could be as accurate as you can be every day of the range, but now your adrenaline, your hands,
and you're shaking, and
your hands like this, and that round is going to go through walls. It's going to go through sheetrock. Where a shotgun, rack it, point it, and
go. Yep.
Well, and it's going to spray and cut whatever comes through it. You know what I mean?
And it's going to give you enough time to get back far enough that maybe you could help yourself out too.
Yep.
I agree.
You also have the butt end of it to use as if you needed to, you could use it to push something away. Where a pistol, what are you going to do? Throw it at them? I mean, the turn pistol whip only goes so fucking far.
Right.
So.
And honestly, I've heard this saying a million times, and I don't. Maybe one of you can explain it to me better. But why do they say don't bring a gun to a knife fight?
Because a knife fight, you want to get away. So I've been on both sides of edge weapons defense. I've trained it. I've practiced a lot with it. your number one first thing that you want to do in an edge weapons altercation is distance. You want to get away.
With a gun, there is no distance gap.
You have to get away from an edge weapon. You could, if you get caught up in that, the outcome is usually pretty bad. Whether you got a gun or not, get distance, distance.
If I'm 25 feet away from Jim, and he has a knife and I have a gun, we know who's going to win that. But if
action
Jim gets
is a lot quicker than reaction. So
well,
if you have a gun on your hip and someone's coming at you with an edge weapon,
you could even throw that edged weapon, couldn't you?
No, you're not. You have to look at like reality situation.
Okay.
If I'm 20 feet away from somebody and they're coming at me with a knife, they're probably going to reach me before I can draw down
and accurately shoot.
That's facts.
Right, but that's closing the gap. That's the difference of it. But once they're inside and close and personal, you're fucked. That's the biggest thing because, okay, I take a gun and I'm turning a gun. They've already dropped a knife and hit me twice more with it.
That's not distance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't be a part of it. Get away from it.
I always have heard that saying and never really truly, because I'm like, I'll freaking
treat it like
first.
Treat it like the pussy in the saloon. Don't go near it.
Gotcha. Use caution and stay away.
Condoms won't help you in this scenario. Just saying.
They were rewashing them back at the saloons. They had to reuse condoms because they couldn't afford to buy new ones or get fresh ones.
Oh
so
my God! Could you imagine?
Them out.
They washed them out, and it was usually made of pig or sheep intestine.
I was going to say sheep intestine.
No, you walk up there, Jim goes up. He's like, "I'll take a size 7." I walk up there. I'm like, "I'll take a 9/16." So just look like, yeah, like. Could
you have a clean stomach anywhere?
I just butchered my own pig. It's okay. I'm gonna go ahead. You know what I mean? Like. Well, as always, we're gonna Nicole, I think you're gonna be heading on out. So thank you for joining us, Nicole. I think we're gonna be wrapping it up, or we still want to keep going.
No, I'm good. I went through everything, and
I think we went through everything.
This was really good. Thank you.
Well, listen, okay, as always. Oh shit! Hold on, you can't go yet. Here's the daily.
Tired nurse.
The tired nurse, the daily affirmation today, which I got called the fuck out again with this one.
Did you or did I?
No, I did. Well, all of us did actually. When you hit the fucking goal, never forget which asshole smirked when you stumbled, laughed when you fell, and was absent when you fucking needed them.
Karma's a bitch.
Okay, I feel real called out by that one. But
you feel real called out. Listen, Carl better feel fucking called out. Carl, it's time to end the goddamn show.
Come on, Carl.
Come on, Carl.
Carl.
Hello.
Yo, can you stop playing with fucking Jesse from Toy Story and end the fucking thing already? Gee.